Hey everyone, welcome to the More Knits podcast. My name is Abby and this is a video podcast about what I've been knitting. Sometimes I talk about other crafting and sometimes I talk about general entertainment that I have been enjoying. So thank you for returning. This is episode 21. I do want to apologize for the lighting. It's a very gloomy day outside, which is nice because it's been super hot. So it's nice to have some rain to cool things down a bit. But of course, it's dark outside. I've compensated with some very dramatic lighting because it's all I have, and I'm a little bit blown out, but we work with what we have. This is a very casual podcast. This is not highly produced in any capacity. I am drinking a cup of tea because it's a little late in the day to make coffee. I mean, not really, but this was faster to make. So not promising that I won't take a coffee break in the middle of this episode. We will see. I also have a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about at the top of the podcast. Just a couple of life updates, a couple of things to talk about in terms of this podcast. It is not imperative that you listen to it. So if you're just interested in the knitting, I will put a little time code here that you can skip through. That's totally fine with me. I'm not offended at all if you want to skip through it. But since it is pertaining to the podcast as well, I thought I would put it at the front of this instead of the end. So the biggest thing is that I have graduated. So I graduated this past weekend. I now have my bachelor's. It was all very exciting, if not a little uneventful, because of course it was virtual, and it was just like a quick celebration in our living room. They didn't read the names out. They just kind of like flashed, like scrolled all of the names across the screen. And like, it wasn't even in an organized way. It was just like masters and bachelors and associates and this major and that major. And so, I actually missed my name and I had to like rewind it and, hit pause so I could see my name. But anyway, it's okay. I did put a little post on my Instagram about like how I feel about this whole situation, which is that ultimately this is the way that it had to be, and it was totally the right call, and it's okay. It is a little bit disappointing, but also there's nothing more I can do about it, and I don't think it takes away from all of our achievement. If you've graduated, if you know someone who's graduated, I mean, we're all just as proud of ourselves, right? Like we all deserve to celebrate in whatever ways we can. So that was a little bit more of a ramble than I meant to, but I just wanted to say that I graduated, and even though I'm very proud of myself, the reason why I bring this up is because I have been so focused on school, and I've been working multiple jobs alongside school. And like my main focus in the past 5 years has been get through school and graduate. And basically everything else in my life that I do has just kind of been, if I can do it, if I have the time to do it, if I have the energy to do it. And so there's all of these things that I want to do in life that I just haven't been able to, because my main focus has been school and work and honestly just getting through the day. So I work a full-time job, but I no longer have school, and that means I have so much more time in my life, and there are a lot of things I want to do, not just more knitting, not just this podcast, but ultimately what I'm trying to get at is I have a lot more time to put into this podcast. I have a lot more time to put into knitting, and I think where I don't want to say failed, but sometimes where I failed or where I really lacked in producing this podcast or in posting about what I've been working on and kind of keeping all of that up to date. I'm not perfect, but I now have the time that I really was lacking to be able to put into this. So I never expect these videos that I put on YouTube to be highly produced or for this to go any further than I've already taken it, really. But I do have a bit more effort to put in, and I do have some plans for upcoming things that I want to put out into the world. So if you're not following me on Instagram, that's kind of the place to be updated a little bit more regularly than YouTube, for example. And everything is always linked down below if you want to find me somewhere. But it's not mandatory. If you just like watching YouTube, I will try my best to fill you in on all of the big things that are happening here on YouTube as well. Okay, I might have to cut some of that out because I really rambled and I did not mean to. So with all of that being said, let's actually get into the knitting now. So my first whip, actually over here, thought I was organized, I guess not. So my first project is actually a hoe, a half object. And I finished the vanilla sock that I was working on last podcast. This is knit out of Knit Picks Felici yarn in the colorway Drama Club. And it is of course, self-striping, as all Felici is. And it's just light pink, light gray, and dark gray stripes. It wouldn't be my podcast if I didn't drop something right in the middle of what I was talking about, right? So these socks, which actually kind of match the shirt that I'm wearing right now. I knit this shirt. This is the Tanya by Caitlin Hunter. I actually don't wear it very often, but it's the only short sleeve shirt that I have made. And it is getting hot outside. It's like 67 degrees right now, I think. It's a little warm. Like I mentioned earlier, it's cooled down. But so the details about this sock. This is very standard for me. 60 stitches around, knit on size US 0 needles. I am knitting these on DPNs, and the DPNs I'm liking right now are the Knitter's Pride Karbonz needles. They're like, I don't know, $12 to $15 a set, so not terribly inaccessible for the majority of people, I think. At least in terms of, in the context of knitting as a hobby and what we have to spend on it to continue knitting. Okay, anyway, that's another thing for another time. But I am knitting a 1x1 twisted rib cuff and a heel flap and gusset. Yeah, and finished off the toe. I've been making my toes a little pointier lately, and really all that means is I've just been decreasing a couple of more rounds before Kitchenering off the toe than I normally do. And it does kind of make the socks look a little strange when they're not being worn, but I do find that fits my foot a little bit better. I just think it hugs my toes a little bit better. And speaking of that, another thing that I've been doing with my socks is I have been knitting the leg at 60 stitches, and then when I go to knit the gusset decreases, I'll decrease a couple of more rounds than I normally would. So I have like 56 or 54 stitches, and then knit the foot with those fewer stitches. And I find that helps, it just makes for a better fit. I mean, the leg is still easy to get on because 54 stitches is like a little small for me. But then the foot really hugs my foot and really helps it to stay on. So that's what I've been doing lately, and I think I'll keep doing that because it really works out for me. And then I have started my second sock. And the only reason this is happening is because what else am I going to do during Zoom meetings? But I'm almost to the point where I will start putting in the heel. And I just wanted to share one last thing about these. It's a really small detail. When you are knitting 1x1 twisted ribbing, it always looks great, I think. But one thing that can happen, I'll show you as an example on this sock that I knit. Let's see, let me let it focus for a second. Okay, there we go. So you can kind of see on that last round of ribbing that I knit, right here, these stitches, you can kind of see that the knit stitches are kind of stretched out looking a little bit. Sorry, my camera's not the best. But I think you can see how that last row of knit stitches, just like the V in the knit stitch is kind of stretching out a little bit. And if you look at this sock, I purposefully made the mistake on the second sock so that I could show you what that looks like. And I did it right on this sock. So you can see on this sock that it does not have that row of stitches that are kind of stretched out looking. So I'll show you side by side. Okay, so that's a side by side. And you can see that this sock does not have that round of stitches, and this sock does. So the way that you remedy this is on your very last round of ribbing, before you start your sock, you will knit the last round without twisting your stitches. So it's just knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. And what that does is it just like makes your knit stitches on your ribbing kind of seamlessly transition into your stockinette, and it doesn't stretch your knit stitches or make your knit stitches look sloppy like it would if you just twisted your knit stitches for the entirety of the cuff. So if this is something that you don't give a shit about, or you don't even see the difference, that's totally valid. This is just a tiny detail that I think it looks a little bit better this way. It's easy enough to fix. I mean, it's actually easier than if you were to twist your stitches the entire way, because I think twisted stitches are a little bit harder than just normal stitches. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that. I thought that was just something interesting. I've actually never seen that anywhere. I just noticed that I don't like the look of the cuff when I don't do that, and realized that if I just knit those stitches instead of twisting them on the last round, it doesn't look like that. So those are my vanilla socks that I'm working on. So the next whip is a sweater, and last episode I talked about how I was going to cast on a certain sweater that I had in mind. I had the yarn ready, and I was motivated to cast it on, and I did. The same night that I ended that podcast, I immediately cast on this sweater, and since then it has been 3 weeks, and this is how much I have knit on my sweater. It's a lot, and almost a full sweater, in fact. So a few details. This is the Doocot by Kate Davies. It is a sport weight cropped raglan knit in the round, of course, because it's a raglan. Actually, raglans don't have to be knit in the round, but I don't think you'll find many raglans knit in pieces nowadays. We used to knit everything in pieces, and we have since learned a much more efficient way of knitting, hand knitting at least, which is knitting in the round. So I am using the Quince & Co. Chickadee yarn in the colorway Nightshade, and it's just this beautiful plum purple. It's definitely my shade. I think I have a couple of store-bought shirts that I wear all the time in this color, so that's very promising. Of course, I won't be able to wear this once it's finished, but I mean, that's the forever struggle of a knitter in the summer. We're usually making something that we can't wear right away. It's okay. Summer doesn't last that long. And who knows, we might not even be going anywhere this summer. So does it really matter? So I gave you a quick overview of the sweater, and I'll kind of break it down a little bit more. So I self-knit the neckline, but you cast on like a pretty standard raglan, and you knit increases for the sleeves. Once you're done with that, you put the sleeves on hold, you knit the rest of the body, and then you pick up the sleeves and knit them in the round. So the most interesting thing about this sweater and what drew me to it is the ribbing. At first glance, it does look like 1x1 standard ribbing, but it actually is a little bit different. And the technique that you use really makes the knit stitch column stand out, which I think looks great. And it also doesn't pull in very much. So you can see maybe it pulls in ever so slightly right there, but it stays pretty straight, which for a sweater with this much ribbing on the bottom, I don't want a bodycon sweater. I just want a sweater that I'll be comfortable in. And the ribbing is Also, on the sleeve cuffs. So let's talk about the sleeves for a second. Actually, let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about the sizing. So the sweater pattern has, let me check actually how many sizes this has, because I can't remember if it is that size inclusive. Okay, so there are 8 sizes, and it goes up to a 58-inch bust, and the smallest amount of positive ease it recommends is 4 inches. So that's about a 54-inch bust. So that's not very size inclusive. Could definitely be a lot better, because that is an entire, I don't know, 3 or 4 sizes that that this pattern doesn't accommodate for. So that's one issue I have with it. The second issue is more of a personal one, because I am knitting the 4th size, which is the 46-inch bust, which is about 8 inches of positive ease on me, maybe 7 inches. It's been like 2 months of quarantine. I don't really know my size right now, but I'm gonna guess it's about 7 to 8 inches of positive ease on me. And the pattern recommends 4 to 10 inches of positive ease. And as a larger chested woman, got larger breasts than the average, I know that 10 inches of positive ease is just not the way that I want to go. What that means is I will be swallowed in a huge garment that basically tints out. And that's just a style. There's nothing like wrong or negative about that style. But I just personally find it a little too casual to wear daily, especially into the office, which is where I wear the majority of my clothing. So I know to stay away from a lot of positive ease. So this is partly my fault, is what I'm trying to say. But I have really been trying to stay away from tight-fitting clothing, especially as I am kind of changing through multiple sizes. I don't want something... I've knit a couple of sweaters that are just way too small for me, and I just never wear them. I'm more likely to wear something that's a little more oversized than I am that's too small. So I was kind of erring on the side of this being, I don't know, 2 to 3 inches more positive ease than I needed or than I wanted, but I was just going to deal with it. And I'm okay with clothing being a little bit too big, like I said, versus too small. However, I think I should have knit the 3rd size instead of the 4th size. I think I got a little too ambitious with how much ease I wanted, and the sweater's a little big on me. This would not be the biggest issue if I was knitting a different style of sweater. For example, if I was knitting a drop sleeve like I did for my weekender sweater, which I actually have right here, conveniently. This sweater I love. I think this fits me super well. I love the way it looks on me. This is, again, the Weekender by Andrea Mallory. Who doesn't know this pattern? But just in case, if you're beginner knitter, if you're not that into the industry or the patterns or whatever, I always like to mention what they are. So this is a drop sleeve sweater where you pick up the sleeve stitches and there's very little shoulder shaping. And as you can tell, this sweater is quite wide. In fact, I think it's wider than the Raglan that I'm knitting right now. And this pattern does recommend, I think, 10 inches of positive ease. And I think I did knit somewhere around there, maybe like closer to like 5 to 8 inches of positive ease. But basically, it's a lot of ease on me and more than I would normally like to knit, as I've been explaining. The reason that sweater works on me and I think it looks really nice and I end up wearing it a lot is because the shoulders fit me perfectly. The arm sky or the armhole fits around my arm and around my shoulders very well. So the rest of the body, fits me like here. But I think that looks totally fine. I think that looks intentional. It looks a little bit oversized, but again, in an intentional way and not in a, oh, you're wearing a sweater that's 3 sizes too large for you kind of way. What happens with the raglan style is that the sleeve stitches are very closely linked to the body stitches. So as you are increasing on the body, you also must increase on the sleeves. And that is just the way that formula works. You have to increase on the sleeves as you increase the body, or the sweater just won't look right and it won't work. And you can change the depth or the rate at which you increase. And a lot of good patterns will account for that as it goes up in sizes. Actually, so if you're curious or interested, a book that talks about this is Sweater Design in Plain English by Maggie Rigetti. I got this for like $5 used. It may be out of print, I'm not sure, but it is a great book if you're interested in sweater design. And this author has a formula where she kind of fixes the issue that I'm talking about, where the sleeves or the shoulder stitches grows too large while you're increasing also for the body. And it's illustrated here where you work from the neckline to the shoulder tip at a 45-degree angle, from the shoulder tip down to the underarm at a 60-degree angle, and then you work a little bit more at a 45-degree angle. So that is a formula for a hopefully better fitting raglan. I haven't actually tested this or knit this, but that was very informative to me when I was trying to design a raglan. I might still try to design that raglan in the future. I'm not sure, but anyway, that is especially useful for larger busted people, because sweaters are almost always measured and sized based on bust. And just because I have a larger bust does not mean that I have like giant shoulders. Okay, all of that to say that this sweater does not follow that modified version of a raglan. This follows a very traditional version of a raglan, which is where the sleeve stitches grow at the same rate that the body grows. Of course, the percentage of stitches are different, but they grow at the same rate or at the same angle. So what ends up happening, and what is my issue right now with this sweater, is that the body, albeit a couple inches bigger than I would have liked, still fits and will just fit at a slightly oversized size, and that's totally fine. The sleeve, however, is way too big, and I contemplated just really trying to go for that oversized look, but I think it is really an issue because I'm not going for a super casual slouchy fit. I'm going for a nice fitting sweater that has some positive ease in the body. And so what I want is my sleeves to have significantly less positive ease percentage-wise than the body has, because I want the arms to fit relatively snugly while the body still remains somewhat loose and oversized. And that is what I find on my weekender, because it is a drop shoulder construction and the sleeve can fit more snugly than this style of raglan, or this the way that this raglan is written can. So I'm not entirely sure what my plans are to fix this. I'm definitely going to take out the sleeve. This was, I don't know, probably 2.5 to 3 hours of knitting. So it's a little unfortunate to have to take it out, but I put it on and I just know that I won't wear it. In fact, let me just throw it on so you can see. Okay, so this is unblocked, and I knit this sweater out of previously knit yarn, so it's a little like crinkly looking. So that'll get better when I block it, of course. You can see that, like, yes, it is a lot of positive ease, but I'm okay with the way that this fits. I mean, I think it looks fine. I probably would prefer it to be a little, to have a little less ease, especially in the back. But I think it looks okay. It's totally, I'm not going to rip the whole thing out because of it. But the sleeve is really where I have an issue. You can see like it's just so much larger than my actual arm. And I know the camera's getting a little bit blown out, but I think you can definitely see like where this is just like kind of bulky and slouchy. And I just like what is going on here? This is so much larger than my arm. And I just really don't like how the shoulder fits. Especially, I mean, you can see like just how slouchy and like baggy this sweater is. And I just really hate like all of this bunching. I really dislike that. So I'm not sure if there's a way to completely salvage this and get it exactly the way I'm wanting. I think part of it really is just the fact that this is a raglan, and raglans just don't fit as well for larger chested people as they typically can for smaller chested people. But my plan is to rip back the sleeve to the armhole. Here, I'll demonstrate on this armhole. Basically, this is what we're dealing with, and this is quite large, again, for my size, for my bust size. This is quite a large arm. And so I think what I'm going to do is basically decrease where I've picked up stitches here, or where I've knit stitches here, cast on stitches, that's the word. Basically decrease this so that it actually fits like this. And there will be a little bit of bunching under the arm. I think I'm okay with that. I think it'll look pretty decent since my arms will be covering the underarm the majority of the time anyway. But again, I'm not sure. I'm just gonna try this and see what happens. So I'm going to decrease those stitches so that we're working with a smaller armhole. And then I'm going to just immediately start decreasing, and I'm going to decrease at a slightly faster rate than the pattern calls for. And we're going to see how that goes. So I'm not sure if it's going to work. I'm not sure if it's going to look good, but I really have put so many hours into this that I don't just want to not try. So that's the plan. I know that was a really long explanation. Hopefully it was somewhat informative, and I will definitely work on this and report back what worked and what didn't. Hopefully it worked, but again, we'll see. I am a little bit concerned because I only have one skein left of this. I'm hoping that reknitting the sleeve and making the sleeve so much smaller is going to save on enough yarn that I don't have to buy more. But I'm not sure if I can get away with finishing this with only one more skein, so we will see. I might have to put this on pause while I order more yarn, but hopefully I don't. Okay, so to break it up a little bit, because that was a lot of knitting talk, I have a crochet project. So a couple of weeks ago, I started a granny stripe blanket. This is the same crochet blanket that every knitting podcaster on YouTube has started and talks about at length. No, I'm just kidding. But it is the same pattern that you've probably seen a lot. This is the granny stripe pattern by Attic. Where is it in my notes? Attic 24. It is just a very basic version of the granny square where there's 3 double crochets in each double crochet, or in each space between the clusters. This is a free pattern. It's very simple. And I just want to touch on really quickly that I thought I was never going to make one of these because I just don't have beautiful yarn scraps. And you don't have to make a blanket just out of yarn scraps, of course, but I have so many yarn scraps and I just couldn't think of anything better to make out of them. So I'm making a blanket. Crochet goes a lot faster and uses more yarn than knitting. So it's not quite as intimidating, I think, as it could be. But back to the yarn scraps. I just thought that my blanket was going to look fugly, and I didn't want to work on something that was purely just to use up yarn. Because again, I just have so many yarn scraps from old socks. People have given me yarn scraps. you know, like, look, there's an orange stripe in here from my Knit Pick socks, right? Like, I just have so many yarn scraps that feel like they don't go together. But I have to say, I really like this blanket. In the end, I think it works really well. It's coming across a little intense on camera. In person, the colors do kind of transition into each other a little bit nicer, or kind of go together. But I'm having a lot of fun with this blanket. It's basically that same feeling of self-striping socks where you just want to get to the next stripe. I kind of just want to get to the next color. So I'm having a lot of fun. This is a very wide blanket. It is over 6 feet wide, and I'm going to show you exactly. I will illustrate to you how wide that is, especially if you are not American and you don't know feet, because I cannot convert that into any other measurement. Okay, so we start here at the edge, and this is how wide it is. We're still going. Okay, there's the other end. So it is wide. It is giant. It's probably a little too giant. I just started crocheting chains, and here we are. So it's big. It's interesting and funky, and also kind of beautiful at the same time, and I am really enjoying working on it. I'm using a size F 3.75 millimeter crochet hook, and just crocheting on it whenever I have a chance. Sometimes I'll just sit on the couch and just crochet one stripe, and that'll take me like less than 15 minutes or something like that. I don't know, I should time myself, but it is really fun, and it gives my hands a nice break from knitting. The other way that this is a tolerable project for me is that I am not weaving in ends. I'm using the magic knot method, and what I did was I just spread out all of my yarn scraps, and I just started caking up a giant yarn cake, and I'll post a photo here of what that looked like. It was huge. It was like this big. And I just started winding up yarn scraps, and then I would just magic knot them together, snip the ends off, and just work from the cake. So I'm not working from a bunch of individual yarn scraps. And the reason I find that is more interesting to me than a bunch of little yarn scraps that I'm just grabbing as I'm going is that I kind of forgot in what sequence I put the colors. So I didn't know what the next color was going to be, and I was excited to get to it, and I was excited to see how it looked with the previous color and how overall it came together. So I'm just enjoying working on it. It's not going to be, you know, all my colors. It's not going to be a beautiful curated blanket, but what it is going to be is handmade. It is going to be a blanket full of scraps that most of them I can point to and, you know, talk about which project that those scraps came from. Like this green one here, for example, I knit my very first ever sock pattern out of this yarn. This purple yarn here, this was my very first ever like really nice yarn that I bought for myself. So it's just fun to use the scraps in a meaningful way, and also work on something that's not knitting. Speaking of not knitting, I have one more project to show you, and it is not knitting. So I actually started to get into embroidery. I would say a couple of months ago is when I started working on this, and I just forgot to show it in my last podcast, but this is a pattern that I purchased off of Etsy from Stitchdoodles Design. This is called the A Walk in the Woods pattern, and I think it's a really popular pattern. I think I just found it on the homepage on Etsy. But it's just a really cute, very like woodland themed, very bright colors. It really reminds me of Animal Crossing, and I started working on this a few weeks before Animal Crossing came out. So I just think it's really fun and cute, and I've made a lot of progress. So I'll kind of show you. I do think the little animals, little creatures are fun. Like there's a little There's a little snail. Sorry, this is backwards at what I'm looking at. The mushrooms are really cute. Here's a badger that I'm excited to embroider, but I am a little bit intimidated by the creatures because I'm just worried that I'm gonna like make them not cute somehow, because I'm very new to embroidery, to hand embroidery. I mean, embroidery in general. It's not like I've done machine embroidery, but it's been super fun. This was a really relaxing and just like a fun thing to work on, to try something new. I had to learn all of the stitches. I guess I knew a couple. I've taken a couple of hand sewing classes as a kid. So of course I knew like the back stitch and stuff like that, but really working to get my stitches looking nice, it was kind of a challenge, and it was just really fun to work on, and I really need to pull this back out and work on it. It is slow going, and in that way it's similar to knitting, but at the same time, there's just so many different colors you're working on, and especially with a sampler like this, there's a lot of different creatures and like leaves and just a lot of different things to work on. So if I'm getting bored of something, I can just kind of hop to the other side and work on something different with a different stitch. So yeah, I just thought I would share that. I probably won't share my progress every podcast because I don't know. I probably won't make that much progress on it, to be honest. But I'm excited to show you when it's finished, and I'll definitely show you that badger when I embroider him. So this episode went a little longer than expected. I went on that unplanned Raglan rant. But as always, if you have anything to share about any of the things that I talked about, if you want to correct me or add to what I'm talking about, definitely leave it in the comments below. We're all here to learn and grow and challenge ourselves. You can find all of the projects and the yarn and the materials that I talked about in this episode in the description box below, as well as where you can find me elsewhere on the internet. And I hope that you're doing all right in quarantine, hanging in there. You know, it's a long journey, and we are definitely in it for the long haul. So keep knitting, keep trying to make it through each day. We can definitely do this. I think I'm going to go knit the heel to this sock now, and I will talk to you next time.